Have you ever felt like no one truly listens or understands you? Well, today we are going to be exploring a groundbreaking communication approach that will hopefully solve this issue and transform the way you connect with everyone around you. Welcome to the Wise Words Project, where we transform the best book ideas into actionable insights. Today, we're going to be diving into Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. So what can you expect in this video? Today, we're going to be covering many powerful ideas. Here are 3 of them as a little teaser of what's to come. So 1, the 4-step NVC process, which is a simple method to improve any conversation. Number 2, the power of observations. We're going to learn how to describe what's happening without judgment to build clarity and connection. 3, we're going to learn how to express our feelings well. So we're going to cover how to own your emotions and express them constructively. So by the end, you'll have the tools to connect deeply and resolve conflicts with ease. If that sounds valuable, like this video and subscribe for more life-changing insights. So, let's get started. We'll start with what is nonviolent communication, NVC. So have you ever walked away from a conversation thinking, why didn't they understand me? Or why did this escalate so quickly? Chances are the problem wasn't just what you said. It was how you said it. Nonviolent communication, or NVC, is a powerful framework to bridge that gap. Developed by Marshall Rosenberg, NVC is more than just a communication tool. It's a mindset that helps us connect with others, even in the most challenging situations. So, what is the 4-step NVC process? Well, it's based on 4 easy steps that can transform the way you speak and listen. So starting with number 1, we have observations. We're going to start by describing what's happening without judgment or evaluation. This lays a neutral foundation for a conversation. For example, instead of saying, "You're always late," try, "You arrived 15 minutes after we agreed to meet." 2, feelings. This is where we're going to identify how the situation makes you feel. You're then going to be specific and avoid confusing feelings with thoughts. For instance, say, "I feel disappointed," instead of, "I feel like you don't care about my time." 3, we have needs. So we're going to reflect on the unmet needs behind your feelings. Needs are universal, like respect, understanding, or collaboration. For example, "I feel disappointed because I need reliability in our commitments." Then 4, we finally got requests. Finally, we're going to make a clear, actionable request to address that need. For example, "Would you be willing to text me if you're running late?" This isn't about manipulating someone into doing what you want. It's about creating mutual understanding so everyone's needs can be met. With all this being said, why does NVC work? Well, NVC shifts our focus from blame to understanding. It's not about who's right or wrong, it's about recognizing that behind every feeling is a need. And when we address needs directly, conflict dissolves and connection takes place. But how do we move past these judgments, which we make almost automatically? Well, before we look at this, let's explore what causes violence in conversations in the first place. So, why does conflict so often spiral into violence? Well, Marshall Rosenberg offers a profound insight. Violence stems from the belief that others cause our pain and therefore deserve punishment. It's a mindset rooted in blame, and it creates an emotional barrier that keeps us from resolving the real issue, which is unmet needs. So, let's look at the role of empathy in diffusing conflicts. Here is the surprising truth. The more we truly hear others, the more they're willing to hear us. Think about it. When people feel blamed or judged, their focus shifts to defending themselves, not addressing your pain. But when we empathize, we create a space where connection and understanding becomes possible. So imagine someone lashes out in frustration. Our instinct immediately might be to argue or to retaliate. Instead, what if we paused and asked, what need is this person trying to express? Empathy doesn't mean condoning this bad behavior. It means recognizing the humanity behind it. Now we're going to talk about why dehumanization fuels violence. The biggest obstacle to peace, whether in families or nations, is dehumanization. When we reduce others to labels like selfish, evil, or wrong, we stop seeing their humanity. This shift in thinking prevents meaningful dialogue and turns even minor disagreements into seemingly insurmountable battles. Imagine how many arguments could be resolved if we just simply said, "Here are the needs of both sides, here are the resources, what can we do to meet these needs?" This approach, though simple, is incredibly rare. So here's a cheeky little rule of thumb for peace. The more we hear them, the more they hear us. When we start with empathy, we dismantle the barriers of blame, judgment, and anger. This doesn't just diffuse tension, it lays the foundation for mutual respect and understanding. So if children were taught this mindset, conflicts at every level, from playgrounds to political negotiations, could transform. The question is, can we take the first step? To take that first step, we need to shift how we perceive and describe what's happening around us. That's where the power of observation comes in. Let's explore that now. So, observations, the foundation of clear communication. How often do we jump to conclusions in a conversation? Maybe somebody interrupts us and we instantly think, they're so rude. But what if this snap judgment is the very thing preventing understanding? Observations are the foundation of nonviolent communication. They focus on what actually happened, not what we think about it. So here's the secret. When we mix observations with evaluations, we risk creating defensiveness. The Indian philosopher Krishnamurti called it the highest form of human intelligence, to observe without evaluating. Example, let's break it down. Imagine your friend didn't return your text. If you were judging them, you might say, you're ignoring me. But with an observation, it's just, I noticed you didn't respond to my message yesterday. The first approach assigns blame. The second invites curiosity and dialogue. So why is it that judgments block a connection? Well, judgmental language often labels people as good, bad, right, or wrong. This alienates others and creates resistance, making it harder for us to solve the real problem. So think about this. If your coworker is detail-orientated, you might label them as picky. But if you're the one focused on the details, they're careless. Judgments aren't objective. They're reflections of our unmet needs and values. So then, with all this being said, how can we master these observations? Well, we need to be specific. We need to describe the action or event without generalizing. So instead of saying something like, you never listen, try, during our last conversation, you looked at your phone while I was talking. You've got to stick to the facts. Think like a reporter. State what you see or hear, not your interpretation of it. So mastering observations helps us build trust and prevents conversations from spiraling into conflict. But what happens when somebody responds negatively to our message? Well, NVC offers a powerful way to handle these moments by focusing on feelings and needs. Let's explore that next. So before we go into feelings and needs, let's talk about taking responsibility for our feelings. Have you ever said, you made me so angry, or I feel hurt because of what you did? Well, these phrases feel natural. They might be doing more harm than good. And here's the surprising truth. No one else makes us feel anything. So let me explain. Our feelings don't come from other people's actions. They come from our own unmet needs. When we understand this, we reclaim the power to handle emotions constructively. So why does this shift even matter? Well, when we say, you made me angry, we're shifting responsibility onto somebody else. This often leads to blame, defensiveness, or even conflict. But when we own our emotions, we open up the door to resolution and deeper connection. For example, instead of saying something like, you upset me when you didn't call, try, I felt disappointed because I needed reassurance that you were okay. Notice how the second version focuses on your feelings and needs, not on blaming the other person. So, the stimulus versus the cause distinction. Marshall Rosenberg, the creator of NVC, emphasizes a critical distinction. So stimulus is the event or behavior that triggered our feelings, and the cause, and this is important, is our underlying needs and thoughts that created those feelings. For example, imagine somebody cuts you off in traffic. You might feel angry. The stimulus is the other driver's action, but the cause is your need for safety and respect on the road. When we separate the two, we gain clarity and avoid emotional escalation. So now, let's focus on the language that empowers. So to practice taking responsibility, we need to replace phrases like, I'm mad because you, with, I feel frustrated because I need. This really simple shift diffuses tension and keeps conversations solution focused. So taking responsibility for feelings is transformative, but there's only a single part of this equation. So what is driving these emotions? Well, it's our needs. So in the next section, we'll uncover why identifying and expressing your needs is the key to building meaningful connections. So, expressing your needs, the key to connection. Why is it so hard to say what we truly need? Many of us were raised in environments where asking directly felt selfish or even shameful. But here's the irony after all of this. Unspoken needs often create the very conflicts we're trying to avoid. So this is why needs are at the heart of NVC, because at its core, nonviolent communication is about understanding that behind every feeling, positive or negative, is an unmet need. For example, if you're feeling lonely, you might have an unmet need for connection. If you're feeling frustrated, you could need clarity or respect. The magic here happens when we shift from blaming others to focusing on what we actually need. But why do we even struggle to express these needs? Well, it's because society has conditioned many of us to criticize or analyze others instead of owning our needs. Consider a conflict. Instead of saying, I need more teamwork on this project, we often say, why are you so lazy? Judgment like this creates defensiveness, but when we clearly express our needs, it fosters the solutions. So, with all this being said, how can we express our needs effectively? Well, one, we need to connect feelings to needs. So use the formula, I feel blank because I need blank. For example, I feel overwhelmed because I need support on this deadline. Number two, we need to avoid criticism disguised as needs. So a phrase like, I need you to stop being selfish, isn't really about your needs, it's a judgment in disguise. So instead you need to ask yourself, what need is behind this frustration? 3, we need to use positive and specific language. So instead of saying, I need you to stop ignoring me, try, I feel disconnected because I need more regular connection. Would you be willing to check in once a day? So here's the surprising truth about needs and conflict. Most conflicts happen because people are so focused on proving that they're right that they never address the real issue, unmet needs. But here's the good news. When we make our needs clear, others are often more than willing to meet them. So next time you're tempted to criticize, pause, ask yourself, what am I really needing right now? And when you frame it that way, you're far more likely to get what you want and deepen your relationships in the process. So now, we're going to uncover why guilt is counterproductive and how to inspire people for the right reasons. So, avoiding guilt as a motivator. Have you ever done something for someone, not because you wanted to, but because you felt guilty if you didn't? So while guilt might get a good short-term result, it often leaves both sides feeling resentful or drained. So how can we inspire cooperation without resorting to guilt? Well, here's the problem with guilt-based motivation. So when we use guilt to influence others, we mix up two critical concepts that we discussed earlier. So stimulus, once again, what somebody said or did, and cause, how we interpret it and feel about it. Let's give an example to make this concrete. So saying something like, if you loved me, you'd call me more often. The real message is, I feel lonely and need connection. But this is when guilt has entered the conversation. The other person now feels blamed. This will create a resistance instead of the opportunity for collaboration. Another example, think of the phrase, after everything I've done for you. I mean, it might prompt compliance in the moment, but the long-term cost is often a strained relationship. So, let's motivate for the right reasons. So instead of using guilt, focus on these two questions. 1, what do I want this person to do? And then 2, why do I want them to do it? Example, imagine you want a partner to help with chores. You could say, with a guilt-based approach, you never help around the house and it makes me feel unappreciated. Whereas we can do the need-based approach, which is, I'm feeling overwhelmed because I need support with the housework. Would you be willing to handle the dishes tonight? Notice how the second approach once again invites action without assigning any blame. So, giving from the heart and not guilt. When someone complies out of guilt, their focus isn't on helping, it's on avoiding punishment or shame. This diminishes self-esteem and goodwill. True cooperation comes when people act because they want to, not because they feel like they have to. So let's look at another powerful mindset shift. If you want lasting connection and trust, replace guilt-driven language with compassionate requests. So the next time you feel tempted to say, you should, or you're making me feel, pause. Instead, express your feelings and needs clearly and invite others to collaborate. So this shift doesn't just improve relationships, it makes every interaction feel lighter and more authentic. And when you pair this with clear, actionable requests, you unlock the full power of nonviolent communication. So now let's explore how to make requests in a way that's impossible to misunderstand. So, making clear requests. Have you ever asked for something only to be frustrated when it didn't happen? The problem might not be the other person. It could be how you made your request. So here's the key. Vague or indirect language leaves room for confusion, but clear and actionable requests pave the way for cooperation. So what are the pitfalls of a vague request? Well, vague language often causes frustration. I mean, for example, saying, I need more help around here might leave the other person wondering, what does that even mean? Instead, NVC teaches us to use specific, concrete actions when making your request. So a clear request would sound something like, could you take out the trash before dinner tonight? This removes any ambiguity and makes it easier for the other person to respond. So, how can we then make requests that work? So number 1 is to be positive. You need to frame your request in terms of what you want, not what you don't want. Example, instead of saying, stop ignoring me, say, could you respond to my text by the end of the day? And then 2, we need to focus on actions and not attitudes. Asking someone to be more supportive is vague and subjective. Instead, specify the action. Example, would you be willing to ask me about my day when I get home? 3, we need to check for willingness. A request becomes a demand when the other person feels they're being punished for saying no. So you need to use phrases like, would you be willing to? Could you help me? These will keep the conversation collaborative. So one cartoon captures this perfectly. A man falls into a lake and shouts to his dog, Lassie, get help. And then in the next frame of the cartoon, Lassie is lying on a psychiatrist's couch. The lesson? If your request isn't clear, even the most well-meaning efforts might miss the mark. So, requests v demands. So here's a really good litmus test for when you're making a request or a demand. If somebody says no, how do you react? If you feel angry or resentful, it's likely you are making a demand. But if you can stay open to dialogue, you're firmly in the territory of compassionate requests. So, as we've just seen, clear requests are a game changer. But here's the twist. Even the clearest request won't work if you don't understand the other person's needs. So before you give any advice or ask for something, it's crucial to really listen. So let's uncover how to do that next. Avoid giving advice until you understand needs. Have you ever jumped in with advice only to realize it didn't help or just made things worse? Well, it's a common trap. We try to fix a problem without fully understanding what the other person truly needs. But what if the best way to help is simply just to listen? This just bodes a question. Why do we always rush to fix things? Well, it's natural to want to solve problems, especially when someone we care about is struggling. But here's the catch. When we jump to advice, we often overlook the feelings and needs driving the other person's words. Example, imagine a friend says, I've had such a rough day. If you immediately respond with, you should take a vacation, you might miss that what they actually need is empathy and a listening partner, not solutions. So what is the golden rule of this then, or for giving advice? Ask before offering advice. It's pretty simple, right? Yet it's a game changer. Instead of assuming, try saying, would it help if I gave some suggestions, or do you just need someone to listen right now? This small step ensures you're meeting the other person where they are, not where you think they should be. So how do we go about good listening? Well, this is where we need to unlock the power of reflective listening. So one of the most powerful tools in the NVC framework is reflective listening. This means repeating back what you heard to confirm you've understood it. It sounds very simple, but it's transformative. Example, if somebody says, I'm so stressed about work, you might reflect, it sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed and could use some relief. Is that right? This shows that you're truly hearing them, and it often helps the speaker clarify their own feelings and needs. So why does listening matter more than fixing then? When we rush to fix things, we risk dismissing the other person's emotions. But when we listen, truly listen, we create a space for them to feel understood. And ironically, people often find their own solutions once they feel heard. So the next time somebody shares a struggle, try pausing before you speak. Reflect back their feelings, ask about their needs, and only then can you offer advice if they truly want it. So, listening might sound simple, but it's one of the hardest and most rewarding skills to master. In the next section, we're going to tackle a skill that takes listening even further. How to handle criticism with empathy and turn it into a powerful tool for connection. So, how do we even go about handling criticism with empathy? Well, let's face it, criticism always hurts. Whether it's a snide comment, harsh feedback, or outright blame. It's really hard not to take it personally. What if I told you that criticism is often a gift in disguise? It's a window into someone's unmet needs. So, let's unlock the secret behind criticism then. Well, Marshall Rosenberg teaches that behind every single criticism is usually a person in pain, struggling with their unmet needs. The challenge is to look past the words and hear the feelings and needs hiding underneath. Let's look at an example. Imagine somebody says to you, you're so selfish. You never think about anybody but yourself. At first, this must feel like an attack, but through the lens of NVC, it's likely they're feeling unappreciated and have need for collaboration or recognition. The key here is really not to react defensively, but to try and empathize. So how do we then respond to this sort of criticism? Well, as the standard advice goes, we need to pause and breathe. Criticism can trigger defensiveness, so taking a moment to center yourself before responding will help. Then number 2, we need to listen for the feelings and needs. So we need to ask ourselves, what might this person be feeling? What need could they be trying to express? So an example, instead of reacting to, you're so disorganized, consider they might be feeling stressed and need clarity or predictability. Then 3, we need to reflect back. Show that you've heard them. You can say something like, it sounds like, enter it. So like, it sounds like you're feeling frustrated because da 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 da, for example, because you need more support. And then finish it off with, is that right? This diffuses tension and shifts the focus from blame to understanding. But let's look at why this actually works. Well, when you respond to criticism with empathy, something remarkable happens. The person actually feels heard. The conversation becomes about resolving these unmet needs and not assigning blame. This doesn't mean you have to agree with the criticism. It just means you're choosing to prioritize connection over conflict. So, another mindset shift. Criticism is an opportunity. Joseph Campbell once said, "What will they think of me must be put aside for bliss." So when we stop fearing criticism, we can see it for what it often is, a call for connection from somebody in pain. Example, the next time somebody criticizes you, try this. Instead of saying, "That's not true," say, "Are you feeling upset because you need more acknowledgement for your efforts?" It might just turn an argument into a moment of understanding. So, as we've seen, handling criticism with empathy isn't easy, but is one of the most powerful tools in NVC. And as you practice this skill, you'll notice something fascinating. The more you hear others, the more they'll hear you. Speaking of hearing others, let's explore the overarching needs that drive human behavior and how understanding these can transform your relationships. So we've spoken a lot about feelings and needs. Let's look into the overarching needs in human life. So have you ever wondered why people act the way they do? Why some conversations flow effortlessly, while others feel like battles? Well, the answer often lies in one simple truth. All human behavior is driven by an attempt to meet universal needs. So what is the core then of these universal human needs? Well, according to Nonviolent Communication, feelings, whether joy, anger, frustration, are all signals pointing to whether our needs are being met. These needs are universal, shared by everybody, and this is regardless of culture or background. So some of the most common human needs include 1. Connection, so the need for love, belonging, and mutual understanding. 2. Autonomy, the need for freedom to choose and express ourselves authentically. 3. Safety, the need for physical and emotional security. 4. Growth, the need to learn, create, and achieve. So let's look at an example. Imagine somebody lashes out during a disagreement. Beneath this anger, they might be feeling afraid because their need for safety or respect isn't being met. Recognizing this changes how you respond. So let's look at now how the unmet needs do drive conflict. So when our needs are unmet, we often react unconsciously. We judge, blame, or even shut down. But these reactions are just strategies, often unhelpful ones, to meet those deeper needs. Example, if somebody interrupts you repeatedly, your anger might stem from an unmet need for respect or attention. The interruption isn't the true problem, it's just the trigger. Now let's look at the 6 needs that shape most human behavior. Marshall Rosenberg highlights 6 key needs that often influence our actions. So 1, money, the root of all evil. Not for the sake of money itself, but for the freedom and resources it provides. 2, approval, the desire to be valued and understood. 3, avoiding punishment, so fear of judgment, blame, or loss. 4 is the avoidance of shame, protecting our sense of worth and dignity. 5 is avoiding guilt, steering clear of self-blame or remorse. And then 6 is fulfilling a sense of duty, acting out of obligation rather than genuine desire. These needs often drive conflict, especially when people don't feel safe expressing them openly. So when you start seeing behavior as an attempt to meet needs, everything shifts. Suddenly criticism, anger, or even silence becomes an opportunity to ask, what is this person really needing? What am I needing in this moment? This mindset doesn't just improve communication, it transforms how you see people and their actions. Understanding needs is a powerful foundation for empathy. So let's reflect on the powerful ideas we've explored in nonviolent communication. We started with observations, so we learned how to describe what's happening without judgment or blame. This prevents defensiveness and sets the stage for clarity and connection. We then looked into responsibility for feelings, so recognizing that your emotions stem from your unmet needs, not somebody else's actions. This shift will empower you to communicate constructively. Then we looked at the need to express yourself clearly. Identify and articulate what you need in a way that fosters understanding and not resistance. We then covered empathy to diffuse conflict, so instead of reacting defensively, pause and ask, what need is this person trying to express? With empathy transforming arguments into opportunities for connection. And lastly, we discussed the universal needs. So behind every action is an attempt to meet a fundamental need, like safety, connection, or autonomy. Recognizing these needs can help deepen your relationships. So by practicing these principles, you're not just improving your communication, you're creating space for deeper understanding, trust, and compassion in your relationships. So after this is all being said, what's one small change you'll make to apply these ideas in your own life? Let us know in the comments. If you found value in this video, please like and subscribe, and share it with someone who could benefit from these insights. Together we can build a more empathetic world, one conversation at a time. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.